For those of you who don't know me, which is a reasonable number of you, I'm James. Hi. I have the pleasure of being married to Rachel on the keyboards this morning. We got married in 1996, which is when I moved up here. And from that time, we both came along to this church regularly. And that carried on until the year 2018, just after Messiah joined. I have preached a sermon once which was entitled "The Reasons I No Longer Go to Messiah's Church." Went down quite well. When I started getting this little tap on my shoulder, which basically was saying, God saying to me, I want you to go into the ministry in the C of E, which is a bit of a shock, seeing that I've been Baptist and Pentecostal for the majority of my life. God was calling me to the ministry in the C of E. And they have a really long process to go through. And just over 2 years ago, I started training to become a reader, not the vicar, but a reader in the C of E, which is a slightly different role. It's more leading services, preaching, and pastoral side, coming alongside people. So I'm nearing the end of my second year of that, which has been absolutely amazing. Really, really hard work. Because you imagine full-time job, plus family, plus other things, plus they reckon about 20 hours a week studying. It's hard going, but it has been absolutely amazing. My licensing is on the 14th of September, for those of you who are interested. Anybody who would like to, you're more than welcome to come up to Durham Cathedral for that service at 11 o'clock. Then I've got another couple of years of studying, about half the time I'm doing at the moment on average. What my role is going to look like, I've got no idea at the moment. Still trying to work that one out. But back to this morning. As I was thinking a few months ago about what I could say, Psalm 23 came to mind. A really, really well-known psalm. And I thought, that's what I need to speak on. But as I've gone on, as I've thought about it and prepared it, what I'm speaking on has kind of just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know a huge amount about shepherds and shepherding. In this day and age, or back in Jesus' time, or King David's time, who wrote this psalm. But fortunately, the methods and techniques they use in sub-Saharan Africa are to a large extent very, very similar. And there's a shepherd last century, sounds a really long time ago, doesn't it? Last millennium even. A guy called Philip Keller, who was also a lay minister, and he wrote some books on the 23rd Psalm, on the Good Shepherd. And those books have been really useful for me in thinking what I'm going to say this morning. I'll move that down a little bit. The Lord is my shepherd. Who is the Lord? It's easy to say that, but who is this Lord who is my shepherd? The first thing that came to mind was he is the creator. The Lord who is my shepherd is the creator. He made everything. We read in the beginning of Genesis, in the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. The Lord is the creator of everything. A few weeks ago, was anybody up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to see the Northern Lights? One or two. One little nod down here as well. I went to bed about just before midnight. Saw a little bit, and then got woken up again about 3 o'clock in the morning when Rachel and Rebecca came back in because they'd been driving around all over the place to see them. And some of the things they saw were quite stunning. And I've seen photos other people have taken, which were absolutely incredible. That something in this universe could look just that amazing, and it could come this far south, which doesn't normally happen. The Lord, my shepherd, created those northern lights. The heavens, we read, declare the glory of the Lord. I look out and I see a sunset. Or on that occasion, the northern lights, the small glimpse I did have. They declare the glory of the Lord. We love travelling around. And a few years ago, back in 2019, fortunately it was 19 and not 2020, 2019, we were in Norway. We caught the train from Oslo down to Bergen, which is a stunning line. The views there are fantastic. And then from Bergen, we caught the boat, went up the coast a little way, and then you turn inland and go up the Sonnefjord, which I think is the longest fjord in Norway. And if anybody's ever done this trip, the views are absolutely outstanding. Whether it's at the start, when you've got the land peering through the mist, or as you go further up the fjord. And I can remember almost at the end, looking out across the water, and there was this man, presume a man, this person, I'll be politically correct, this person in a canoe, just canoeing up the fjord. See him there, and then you just look up, and up, and up, and up. And I don't know how far it was, but the sheer height of the cliffs, the majesty of the land around there. The Lord is my shepherd, is the creator of all these things. Or I could go to Switzerland, up in the Jungfrau, the mountains there. The peace and the quiet. The clarity of the air, the cleanness of the air you're breathing. The views across the rugged mountains, snow-capped, even in the middle of summer. The Lord, my shepherd, created all these things. And then we go to the other extreme. I'm a chemist by trade. So we talk about molecules and atoms. Atoms made up of electrons and neutrons and protons. And then you go small and you get quarks, which make up the electrons, the protons, the neutrons. And then I get lost. I can't quite go any smaller. All these infinitesimally small particles that make up everything around us, that we don't understand. We cannot get our head around them. We think we've got as far as it will go. And then we find something else. And then we find something else. The Lord, my shepherd, created all this. And on the sixth day, he said, let us make mankind. And he created us. We are the pinnacle of God's creation. He knows us. He understands us. He knows what makes me tick. I don't know how many people there are in here this morning. 50? I don't know. We are all individual. And God knows each one of us. He knows what makes each one of us tick. The Lord, my shepherd, is the creator. Now, one thing I've had to do over the last couple of years is write some, I think, fairly deep theological essays. I seem to be constantly writing them. As soon as I've handed one in, I'm on the next one. Or sometimes before I've handed one in, I've had to start thinking about the next one. It's just a constant stream. And one thing you have to do is make sure that what you're writing does not become just dead theology. Because there is that possibility. The Lord, my shepherd, is the creator who made everything. Fantastic. But that can become just some dead theology. What does that mean to me? What does that mean to you here and now? In Isaiah, we read, "Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Even youths will faint and be weary, and the young will feel exhausted. But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and be not faint." The last few months have been quite difficult. With everything, with work, which is quite busy, with study, with other things going on. There have been times I've been exhausted, both physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. We can get in that state. But I found this verse to be true. Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Our Creator God, who knows us and who understands us and who gets us, who knows what it's like, because Jesus came onto this world, onto this earth, and lived among us. He is my strength. Every time I've come to God, every time I've thought, how on earth am I going to get all these essays written? I've come to God, and suddenly things have fallen into place. And I want to get the work done. And again, come to me, all who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, the words of Jesus, and I will give you rest. Heavy burdens, we all carry heavy burdens. Whether it's the burden of sin and guilt, whether it's troubles and worries that we're facing, difficult situations, whether it's hurts. We all face these situations. But we have a Creator God who will take those on himself. Jesus came and died for us to bring us forgiveness. We can come to him with our troubles, with our burdens. It's already been said this morning. And he will take them from us. I can remember a few years ago, Rachel was trying to progress a few things at work. And every one of those things she's trying to move forwards, there's a barrier. Everyone, something, someone was stopping every one of those things moving forwards. So she prayed about it. Within the next week, after praying, every one of those barriers was removed. Every single one. And everything that she's trying to progress moved forwards. She must have shared this with some of her work colleagues. Because a few months later, she is in a very similar situation. And one of those work colleagues, who I don't think had any faith, went up to her and said, "You need to pray about these things." Because they could remember what had happened last time. We can come to God with our troubles, with our worries, and he will be there with us, and he will help us. We'll never avoid them. That's important to say. But he'll be there with us. Going back to a shepherd. A good shepherd will care for his sheep. Seems fairly obvious to say. But a good shepherd will care for his sheep. A lot of the land where sheep grew in the Middle East, sheep lived in the Middle East, and in sub-Saharan Africa, is classified as semi-arid, it's dry. It's rocky, it's stony. Things don't grow there very well. And you can tell the difference between the ranch of a good shepherd and the ranch of a not good shepherd. He's probably a hired hand. They're not his sheep. He doesn't really care. Where the shepherd is the hired hand and the not good shepherd, he won't do the work. The vegetation will be very sparse. There'll be no water for the sheep to drink. And they'll be thin and ill because he doesn't really care. Then you get the good shepherd who'll be working hard. He'll be digging the ground. He'll be planting the right things to grow to feed the sheep. He'll be putting in the right fertilizers, the right amount of the right chemicals that they need. He'll provide the right medication for the sheep, digging the irrigation trenches and the wells so there's water so the sheep can have something to drink. So one side of the fence, you just got the brown, rubbly earth. The other side of the fence, you've got the lush, green vegetation. One side of the fence, you've got the sheep who are thin, ill, starving. The other side of the fence, you've got the sheep that are fat, well looked after, happy, and healthy. We have a good shepherd who doesn't leave us. He's not the kind of God who set everything in motion and then go on holiday for a few weeks and leave us alone to fend for ourselves. But he's with us constantly. No matter what situation we're in, working for us. Even when we can't see him, he's there working for us. And he knows us all individually. He knows what we each need. He knows how to get through to us. One of the things that I find is that I need God to drip feed me stuff. This was quite clear in 2017 when this one person said, "You look like a vicar." A few months down the line, "James, you look like a vicar." A few months down the line, "Are you a vicar?" Then the beginning of 2018, "James, you're beginning to sound like a vicar, but in a good way." Often wondered what he meant by that. And then it was just after that that I felt the tap on my shoulder. "James, this is what I want you to do." Now, if I hadn't had that going on beforehand, I think I'd have been even more freaked out and probably run a mile rather than just be completely paralyzed with fear. But I needed that drip feed beforehand because God knows me. He knows what I need to get through to me. A good shepherd will lay down his life or be prepared to lay down his life for his sheep. With King David, we read that he fought the lion and the bear. He didn't run. He was prepared to fight for his sheep's lives. And we've got a God who came to earth and who died for us because he is the good shepherd. And as I was thinking about this, a story that Jesus told came to mind. The shepherd had 100 sheep, and then one ran away. What does he do? Does he think, well, I've still got 99, that's good enough, you can just forget about that one? No, he leaves the 99, and he goes out and he searches for that one sheep. And when he finds it, he brings it back rejoicing, because that one sheep that had gone astray has now been found and brought back. But what does that mean for us? Who is that one? That one is the one who's struggling. That one is the one who's having a hard time. That could be for a variety of reasons. Someone said something that's really hurt or upset them. They've lost the job. A friend has gone, moved somewhere else. It's really hit them hard. Life throws things at us sometimes that are not our fault, and we struggle. What this means is that one person that's struggling is important. It's our responsibility to go after that one person. Not to press on ahead and leave them far behind, but to go after that one person. To go up to them and put your arm around them and say, I know you're struggling. I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I'm going to be here for you. And I'm going to be your strength and your support. Because if we don't do that, that one person may not come back. It means we're looking out for the marginalised, the groups that society tends to cut off. You may remember a few years ago the name Floyd George and the whole Black Lives Matter cry. We had footballers taking the knee before football games. This was quite controversial at the time because Black Lives Matter was a political movement and a lot of people would not have agreed with a lot of their aims. From what I can remember, from what I read, they're talking about anarchy and overthrowing the police for some of them. But the whole concept is so, so important. Floyd George was a man, he'd had a checkered past. My understanding is he was a Christian and he was trying to get things right. Yes, he wasn't perfect, he was still failing. And whether or not he'd done something wrong at that particular moment in time isn't actually key. He was murdered by a white policeman for one reason and one reason only. He was black. And at that moment in time, it was important to stand up and say, Black Lives Matter. Yes, all lives matter, people say, which is perfectly correct. But going after the one means we stand up for the marginalised. Rachel comes home from work one day, and she's in a bit of a state because somebody has basically been really nasty. A bit of bullying, perhaps, picking on her. And she's in a bit of a state. She's feeling worthless. She's feeling about this big. I can go around and say, everybody's important. The whole world is important, which is true. But that's not what she needs to hear. I could say, my family, I love my family very much. My family is so important to me, which is true. But that's not what she needs to hear. Or I can look her in the eyes and say, you are important to me. What other people say is wrong. You are important to me. You are valuable. You are worth something. You are important to me. And that's what this whole concept is, going after the marginalised. It's not that other people are not important. It's at that moment in time, for some specific reason, that group of people or that person needs to know they are valued, they are important. And it could be any group. It could be the young, it could be the old, it could be the unemployed. It could be anybody. Anybody that feels marginalised. God calls us to go after that group of people and say, you are important. As I was standing down there just now, the prodigal son came to mind strongly. We all know the story. The prodigal son goes to his father, two sons. One of them goes to his father and says, give me my share of the inheritance now. I want it now. Basically turning around to his dad and saying, I wish you were dead. Because having my money now, rather than sometime in the future, is more important than having you. The dad gives him the money, and he goes off to another land where he wastes the money. Wine, women, and song. Wild living, whatever. And he ends up with nothing. And a famine hits the land. And he has to go and feed the pigs. And he's so hungry, he wants to eat the food that the pigs are eating. Now, I don't know how much lower than that you can get for a Jewish lad. But that's the state he's in. And one day he comes to his senses and decides, I'm going to go back home. And I'm going to offer myself to my father as a hired servant. So he gets up on his feet and starts walking home. The father, meantime, is there at home. Every day he's there and he's scouring the horizon. Every day he does the same thing. And then one day he sees a speck on the horizon, somebody coming towards him. And as he studies, he sees, that is my son. Now there's one thing the man in his state, his position, would never, ever do. Because it's so undignified. And that is to go and run in public. But what does the father do? He gets up and he legs it as fast as he can towards his son. He doesn't care what people think. He doesn't care if people think he's undignified. Because he loves his son so much. And he's got no interest in bringing his son back as a hired servant. That's his son. And that's all he's interested in. His son has come home. That is the love of God for that one person who has gone astray, that he wants to bring back. And that is our role. One thing I've learned about sheep, they can become cast very easily. A sheep, he's happy, he's content, he's eaten all he needs, and I'm going to go and have a little lie down. So he finds somewhere nice and comfortable, and he has a little lie down. Great. Except on this occasion, he's misjudged it. The ground's a bit softer than he thought. And rather than being on his side, he gradually rolls over onto his back. And he's lying there on his back. And there is absolutely nothing he can do. He'll just lie there on his back, waving his arms and legs around in the air, thrashing frantically to try and pull himself back over. But he can't do it. What happens in this situation is there's a build-up of gas inside. And as the gas builds up, it cuts off the blood supply to his legs. So gradually he can't thrash around anymore. And on a nice cool day, a nice cool time of the year, he'll probably survive for a few days like this. But on a hot sunny day, he's got a few hours at the most before he'll die. The shepherd has to be constantly alert and looking, constantly moving around his sheep, constantly seeing how they all are, looking to the sky, because the vultures know what a cast sheep looks like, and they know what's going to happen. So if he sees a group of vultures flying around in the sky, looping around one particular place, he knows what's going on, and he needs to get there as quick as he can to rescue that sheep, because that sheep is important. And he'll do that by rolling it back onto its side and then up onto its feet, and just holding it on its feet and gently massaging its legs until they come back to life, all the time holding it on its feet. That's the love that God has for us. When he sees us struggling, he will be there. And he wants to help us, to save us, to bring us back to life. And as I was thinking about this, what does that mean? How does that apply to me and to you? I've made it, I can relax. Now I've become a reader. That's it, I've reached my goal in life, I can relax. I don't need to do anything more. All of a sudden, I'm on my back and I can't get up. The one for me personally that I've struggled with over the last few months. Some of you are aware I went to Kenya last year with Masai and a group of others. Hill was there. And it was a fantastic time. Being amongst those pastors there, speaking to them, preaching in the churches, it was absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed it and really benefited from it personally. But hey, I went to Kenya. I preached to 2 different churches there. I spoke to these leaders. I've made it. That's something I've had to fight with over the last few months. I'm not proud of that at all. Because it's been so easy, having done something like that, seen God move in such an amazing way, felt God's presence, to think, yeah, I've made it. This is it. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself on your back, thrashing your legs around in the air. Self-indulgence. I've had a hard time. I just need a bit of a break. Go and treat myself. And suddenly our eyes have shifted from God onto something else. A couple of symbols that I wasn't aware of. If a sheep has got too much wool on him, really thick wool, it's so much easier for them to become cast, to be stuck on their back. Wool in the Bible is often a symbol of the old life before we knew God. If we let too much of that life come back in, take our eyes off God for that reason, we have trouble. Or too fat, too materially well off. I've got everything I need financially. I don't need to worry about anything else. So easy then for our eyes to come off God. We read in Hebrews, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and protector of our faith. But we can be sure if that does happen, we have a God who loves us and will not abandon us. Another reason is our personality. This might sound a strange one. And I'm going to have to be really careful how I say this. I grew up, as I've said, in a Baptist church for about 14 years, and then here for 22 years. And there were certain things that have happened. And I'm not at any point saying those things that have happened, those things that were said, were wrong. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody and saying what you did then was wrong. We've all got different personalities. And we all react to things in different ways. Somebody can see something and think, yes, that's absolutely fantastic. Somebody else can see something, the same thing, and think, don't like that. It's the same good thing. And I think some of these things that have happened, I personally had a bad reaction to because of the way that I am. Not that there's anything wrong with those things themselves, but that I had a bad reaction to it. I'm often asked, why the C of E? You know, it'd been so much easier if God had called me to the ministry here. Why the C of E? One thing I love doing is reading, and I've read loads of books over the last few years, or bits of loads of books. But there's one phrase in one book that I read fairly early on that has stuck with me. It's a book called Vicar by Reverend Alan Bartlett, who some of you may know the name. He's a local vicar in the Durham area. And it contains this phrase, talking about a friend of his. Perhaps God has called me to be a vicar because he wants to use me to preach the gospel, to grow this church, to make this church thriving so we can have a massive impact on the community outside. No. Perhaps God has called me to be a vicar because that was the only way he could make me into the person he wants me to be. Puts a completely different spin on things. Perhaps God has called me out of this congregation, wonderful though it is, because my personality means I need to be somewhere else. And that is a really interesting thought. Perhaps if I'd stayed here, I would have ended up more like that, cast sheep. I don't know. But our personality can make a big difference to this. Could we see something, react to it in one particular way, which is a negative way, because it doesn't work for us? Is this making sense? I'm conscious I could come across as really negative here about the church. I'm not trying to do that. It's me, it's my personality. Something else people have said to both Rachel and me is, what's it like? Should you be in two different churches? And it's a fair point. It'd be lovely to be in the same one, but at the moment, God's calling Rachel to stay here and me to be somewhere else. But there is one church. There is one church in Bishop Auckland. Part of it meets here. Part of it meets at St Anne's in the marketplace. Part of it meets at St Andrews. That's the two bits I go to. Part meets in the Baptist church in the morning. Part meets in the Baptist church in the afternoon. Part meets in the Methodist church. Part meets in Woodhouse Close. Some of it meets at St Mary's. Some of it at St Wilfrid's. Some of it at the Elim. But all one church. So in some ways it doesn't matter which bit we go to. We have to go to the bit which works for us. And if we're in the wrong part, we could end up being like that cast sheep. I shall not want, very briefly. Doesn't mean we have everything we could possibly want. I spoke to somebody once who said, I need an ocean-going yacht and loads of money so I can just go off and be by myself and not see anybody else. And because the Bible says I'll get everything that I need, God's going to give it to me. No, that's not quite what it means. It means contentment. We have a creator God as our shepherd, and he will make sure we have what we need to be content. David suffered. Saul tried to kill him. His son Absalom tried to drive him out of the land. But he could say, I shall not want. Whatever situation we're in, God wants to provide us that contentment. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Amen.